Everyone, and welcome to today's Meet the Expert with Dr. Keith Coble, Vice President of the Division of Agriculture, Forestry, and Veterinary Medicine at Mississippi State University. I'm Chris Boomsma, Chief Executive Officer here at the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology, or CAST, and it's my privilege to give you just an update on CAST, introduce you to the organization, and then hand this special event off. The Council for Agricultural Science and Technology, or CAST, is a nonprofit organization formed roughly around 1972. We're over 50 years old, and we provided credible, unbiased, science-based information over those 50 years about food and agriculture to policymakers, the media, the private sector, and the public. Our science truly does shape agriculture. So we are a US-based, internationally connected organization, and as I said previously, we're a nonprofit 501c3. We do have a variety of memberships because we are membership-based. We have both organizations and individuals that join CAST, and we'd love for you or your organization to join us. We focus across the spectrum of agricultural science and technology. We go through animal to food to plants, and we have work groups built up around each of those areas. Now, this last piece is very important. We are a nonpartisan organization. We are focused on the science, and critically, everything that we develop is offered up free to all. Our educational products and programs are free of charge, like this program here today. The mission of CAST is to convene and coordinate networks of experts to assemble, interpret, and communicate credible, unbiased, science-based information to a variety of audiences. And that includes policymakers, organizational leaders, educators, scientists, the media, the private sector, and the public. Experts, volunteers are critical to our organization. You're going to hear from great experts now today. Now, as I said, our organization is based on a lot of volunteerism. What do our volunteers do? Where do they come from? Well, we have more than 60 board members representing scientific societies, companies, nonprofits, and universities. We have active task force members working on publications that are yet to be released. We also have experts serving as authors, reviewers, and contributors. And surprisingly, we have over 2,000 folks now volunteering for CAST since 2008. A lot of these folks from academia, but also many from companies, the government, and the nonprofit sector. Well, if you would like to explore more about CAST, volunteer opportunities that are here, what our organization does, and the like, please scan the QR code on your screen at this time. You're also welcome to reach out to me. My contact information is on the right side of your screen. You can certainly reach out via email, my cell phone, or simply click on the QR code. I'd love to connect via LinkedIn. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Ashley Brown of Mississippi State University, who is going to be the moderator for today's webinar.
Welcome to CAST Meet the Expert. I'm truly excited today to be able to introduce Dr. Keith Coble. As the Vice President for the Division of Agriculture, Forestry, and Veterinary Medicine, DAFM, at Mississippi State University, Dr. Coble supports the land-grant mission of learning, research, and service. DAFM includes 6 major units with over 1,500 employees statewide. He is a Giles Distinguished Professor, and Dr. Coble has received the SEC Faculty Achievement Award and the Southern Agricultural Economics Association Lifetime Achievement Award. He has served as the president of the Agriculture and Applied Economics Association and on the USDA Advisory Committee on Agricultural Statistics. Dr. Coble earned his PhD in agricultural economics from Texas A&M University and joined the Mississippi State University faculty in 1997. With over 100 journal publications and 165 conference papers, his work focuses on agricultural risk management, farm policy, and data analytics. In 2013 and 2014, he served as the chief economist for the U.S. Senate Agricultural Committee, contributing to the 2014 Farm Bill, and has led Mississippi State University's Department of Agricultural Economics from 2016 to 2021. It's my great pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Keith Coble. Welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. Working with Ashley has been a great pleasure, and I appreciate the introduction today. So why don't we get started? Let me talk to you a little bit about my story, and I want to ultimately talk about policy. I want to talk about trust in that policy process and what I think academics need to learn. I appreciate the opportunity that you're giving me today to talk about these things. Ashley and I often talk to each other that we kind of have to pinch ourselves when we think about how we got to where we did as the VP and the associate VP for our division. We're really proud of what we do here at Mississippi State. We are in the top dozen universities in NSF Ag and Natural Resource rankings. And we recently had an economic impact study that said that we have a $1.7 billion impact on the state of Mississippi. But in terms of how did we get here, I think along the way, neither one of us intended to be an administrator, but we had opportunities that came to us and we took those opportunities. Same is true with policy engagement. I was in grad school trying to decide what I wanted to specialize in, and I took a class in risk analysis that completely it became the focal point of all of the rest of my career, because the fact that agriculture involves uncertainty in markets, uncertainty in yields, other kinds of uncertainty as well, just became the salient feature that I wanted to work on. And in the late 1980s, early 1990s, we had this experimental program called crop insurance that perplexed people because it was highly subsidized, but also not very popular with farmers. And that led me to working on that topic. Little did I know when I chose that for my dissertation topic that it would grow into the backbone of our agricultural policy in the United States. When I graduated in 1993, I was hired at the USDA Economic Research Service, and I left my university and went to there in Washington, working in Washington, D.C., and learned so much about communication while I was there. I learned so much about the policy process while I was there. And it wasn't till I moved on to Mississippi State that I could really look back with a sense of perspective and understand how much the time in DC allowed me to make connections with people, allowed me to understand the policy process, and ultimately it made me a far better faculty member than I would have been if I had not gone and worked for 5 years in DC. Another thing that I will say is that here at Mississippi State, we have a few faculty that have what we call a three-way appointment with teaching, research, and extension, all a part of our titles. And I did that, and I worked based on what I learned at ERS in terms of being able to communicate to a broad general audience, which is so important. I think for a lot of us in academia, we go to grad school and we struggle to learn to speak jargon, and we have to learn the jargon to get our PhD. And then while I was at ERS, I had to learn how to speak to a lay audience again and write for a lay audience. And it was a great experience that hopefully one can do both. And I was perfectly content here at Mississippi State until late 2012 when I got called by my boss to go help out on Capitol Hill. I was teaching our ag policy class, and but it was suggested that I go take that opportunity to go be the chief economist on the minority staff in the Senate Ag Committee. It was a great experience, a great group of people that I worked with, a great opportunity for me to be in the middle of the policy process and to make a bit of a difference along the way. And I was able to use kind of the real world experience that I had gained in communication and sat on the other side of the table and listen to people lobby and listen to people make their case. Still, I wasn't entranced with the idea of moving into administration, but the opportunity came along here a bit later, and I took that opportunity, which now allows me to engage much more on the policy related to agricultural research and extension, and which I think is so very important that we effectively communicate those kind of things, and led me to be the budget and advocacy committee for APLU in terms of funding for our land grant universities. So that's a bit about me and my story and how I got here. Your story is quite likely to be different, but it can still be the right story for you. And so I certainly encourage you to take opportunities when they come your way. Next slide, please. Or there. I think one of the things that I will talk to you about today is a book by Tom Nichols that I read a few years ago, and I still think it's really important. It's called The Death of Expertise. And we in academia with advanced degrees, probably many who are my age or near my age, grew up in an era where becoming a PhD was something to be respected, and your grandmother respected you doing that, and your parents respected you, and your friends did because you had that kind of scientific expertise. But we live in a world now where not only are people less respectful of a scientist, but there are many people who are hostile to expertise, whether you're in academia, whether you're out, because we have made everybody can be an expert if they can Google. And that is a challenge, I think, for many of us my age. When we contemplate that, we have to ask ourselves, okay, how do I function in this world where so many people don't trust academics the way they once did? My parents' generation, they trusted the universities, they trusted the academics, they went to meetings so that they could hear them speak. And it was kind of inherent for my dad to trust the land grant university in my home state. Uh, what Tom Nichols says in his book is that we have perfected destroying trust in institutions, whether they be scientific institutions, religious institutions, or others. Uh, we have found a lot of ways to destroy that trust, and then we have the challenge of what do we do about this if we're in a position where we hope for and expect to be trusted. Let me suggest to you a few things that I said to the ag econ profession when I gave my presidential address. And one of the first things is that I would say is that you should not get an advanced degree in academia without learning some mass communications skills. I did not learn those things while I was in grad student. My major advisor was a great guy and had an extension appointment, but he was focused on making sure that I understood the math and the details of economic reasoning. But that was a different time and era. Uh, One of the things we do here at Mississippi State that I love enormously is a 3-minute thesis competition for our grad students. Absolutely, I encourage uh, faculty and students, if you've not done that, learn how to make that case. Be able to explain your research in 3 minutes on an elevator, and do so that it can be understood by somebody who is not a scientist. Another kick that I'm on is that as I look at the world that surrounds us, part of the problem that we face in academia is that we have lots of folks who think they understand science because they can Google, but they don't understand scientific methods. They don't understand a hypothesis test. They don't understand a probabilistic statement. And therefore, they confuse things like causality. They confuse AI with a causal statement, etc. And I think that we are obligated, and for those of us in academia, we need to make sure our undergraduates understand these topics. And I don't think we do a very good job of it. That we don't make sure that even our undergrads understand scientific methods, hypothesis tests, etc. If we don't produce a bachelor's graduate who understands those things, then what hope do we have of having a clientele out and a voter out in our respective states that understands those things? And that's a challenge for us. And so I really want to emphasize, I'm going to say something about this to our staff later today, is that we need to make sure that we can communicate and help people understand. I also challenge us that we in academia often are our own worst enemy. Are very frequently we are putting out press releases that brag on our universities, that brag on our faculty, that are designed to be the voice of the dean. And I think ultimately that's not effective communication. It's not good marketing. And we need to find a way to communicate that we are the guide and the mentor for others, that we care about them and their needs. We care about what their questions are. And it's a challenge that we've got to write news stories differently. We've got to communicate using technology in ways that we have not done before. And this is a new generation of communication coming along. And it is my hope that uh, the next generation is going to be more attuned to video, more attuned to communicating with different vehicles than we have used in the past uh, to communicate our science. Um, when you want to communicate to policymakers, uh, in my time working on Capitol Hill, what I learned was is that congressional staffers are frequently getting a great education because most lobbyists have one unique quality. They are amazingly good communicators. And we in academia, when we write journal articles, we approach them very differently. That ultimately, that if you want to talk to policymakers and get your message across, you have to be succinct. You have to be able to boil it down to one page at the most. Uh, Policymakers don't want to know how you got them the answer. They want to know what the answer is and how they can use it. Um, when I first started writing at ERS, I had to learn to get rid of the jargon that I used in journal articles. Policymakers are used to being spoon fed information. And if you want to be effective in communicating with those people, you have to convey message in small doses, in small words, without jargon, and cut to the chase of the bottom line. Another person that I'll quote is Dan Sumner, who is former chief economist uh, and assistant secretary for economics at USDA years ago. That sometimes we just need to do basic data and analysis work, and a lot of people don't even think about that. But good data to answer a question is enormously powerful. Now, I want to turn to the question of how do we build trust with our audiences. The good news is that there's been a little bit of an uptick in the confidence in higher education. Now, this is broad, it's all of higher education. But in general, the confidence has dropped significantly since 2015. COVID has something to do with this, but we are generally faced with a population that we're trying to communicate with that is less confident in us than they were 20 years ago. So, with that as a case, I want to draw upon a paper written by some friends of mine, John Anderson, who's extension director at the University of Arkansas, Trey Malone, who is at Purdue, and Jay Ackridge, who's a former provost at Purdue. Uh, they they recently wrote an article, Strategies for Land Grant Universities to Foster Public Trust. I think it's a great article, and I strongly recommend people read it because they talk about this in a way that I think we all need to know. And they point out 4 crisis factors for us to think about. And so let me mention a few of them. First of all, asking the question, are we working on the right problems? And that's a challenge because we have to be somewhat out in front of our clientele. And that's a bit of an awkward place to be. But part of what we must do is talk and listen to our clientele. We have listening sessions every spring, and we have people that come every year, and they tell me the same thing every year. But it's good for me to hear that because we control resources, and do we need to be shifting the from one subject matter to another? Do we need to be hiring new people in some way? Those are challenges that are problematic. But it's absolutely necessity for universities to be thinking about those things and to be working on relevant things that have a high probability that they are going to be useful to your clientele. There are some things that are pretty easy to identify in that space. There are other things that are more challenging, but I think that's part of what we are called to do. This is a dangerous one to talk about, but incentive misalignment. Our faculty incentivized to do research, teaching, and engagement work that is relevant to somebody. And that's not always the case. When we have the P&T process here, we have people that come to me and say, all right, how many journal articles do I need to write to be satisfactory and get promoted? That's not really the right question. Are our faculty incentivized to do things that are relevant to somebody? I will tell you that as an administrator, when I have to go to the state legislature and make the case for our funding, they know who the relevant faculty are. And they question those that are less so. The other thing that I want to mention, and increasingly, I think this is what challenges us, and I don't think I can say this strongly enough. There is clearly an effort in this country to disseminate misinformation and to reduce the trust in our science and in our scientific leaders. And some of this misinformation is coming from the enemies of the United States. I've seen enough data to know that some of this is a part of dragging us down. And that's the world that we live in, that you have people out here who are willing to be increasingly partisan and increasingly wanting to put out information that is negative towards universities. And I think we have to intentionally counteract that misinformation. And we have to be, first of all, absolutely focused on not only being relevant, but being straight up with people that we do science and we do it right, and we ultimately have the best interest of our clientele in mind. I think another dimension of this on the teaching side is that increasingly there are a lot of people who will tell you, don't go to college, go be a plumber. You won't incur all that debt and so forth. And I, as an administrator who spent yesterday in a retreat at my university, we have sometimes done a terrible job of communicating the bargain that our educations are, and that the upside potential over a lifetime is really outstanding. So I am going to stop there, and I am going to uh, answer questions. And so, Ashley, I'll let you sort through them. And
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is a dialogue that you and I have probably every day and sometimes
Mhm.
multiple times a day. I will encourage people to please submit your questions so that we can truly have this multidimensional dialogue. But I want to focus on something that you just talked about. You talked about misinformation. And you and I have been on several calls with different industry partners and academic partners. And we use the term narrative intelligence, right?
Mhm.
Where there is no misinformation anymore. There's only information, right? And that's kind of a
Yeah.
unique way to think about the information that's coming at you from everywhere, which is truly leading to some of the distrust. So you talked about it a little bit, but can you maybe focus on some of the things that we're doing here to truly combat and use narrative intelligence in our favor?
Well, it's challenging. I think first of all that we've gotten into, we have created a collaboratory here to look at food, agriculture, and competitive statecraft, kind of agriculture as it interfaces with military and strategy in terms of where does our country sit in relation to other countries. And I think we see that playing out today in the situation with soybeans and trade with China and other countries as well. Um, at the end of the day, I think we have got to be smart enough to understand that our international opponents are pumping misinformation at us. And part of that misinformation is against our universities. That the one of the strengths that you would say that we have in the United States is our strong land grant universities in terms of the research capacity in agriculture and forestry and veterinary medicine. But we've got to know that if another country wants to attack us, uh, sending social media messages into our population is far cheaper than sending bombs. And so I think we have to understand that that's the world we live in, and we in academia cannot ignore that that's where we're at.
Um, so here's a just a question. How can we start to fix things? We're in this ever-changing landscape in higher education and really other areas, but we come from a background of higher education. So what are maybe some top 3 things? You talked a lot about communication, so clearly that's one of them. But maybe what are some specific things that you think we can do to really help us navigate that ever-changing landscape?
Uh, John, that asked that question, I appreciate it, and you're cutting to the chase. I think first of all we have to become better communicators. And what I see in many cases is that this is a bit of an intergenerational thing. That people of my generation that became communicators, they worked in print media probably. They learned a certain style of writing stories. Uh, and that's kind of what we've been used to. Here in the division, we have a very elaborate system designed to write stories so that our small weekly newspapers in Mississippi have content. But those newspapers are dying out. Um, my sister's in public relations, and more than a decade ago, she sent all of her staff to go get trained in video. Um, we're later to the game, but at least we're in the game now. We have um, encouraged our extension specialists to do short videos that they've recorded on their cell phone for no more than 2 minutes, and huge following in many cases. So I think we have to adopt video. We have to be on different platforms than the small town newspaper. We have to approach teenagers, college students in a different way than we have in the past. And in terms of the way that we communicate, again, being an economist, I think in terms of supply and demand, I would argue that oftentimes universities are thinking about supplying information that our administrators want supplied. And that we don't spend nearly enough time listening to our clientele, the audience that we're speaking to find out what they want to know and to ask those kind of questions. And I think when we talk to them further, we will get better at communicating. And there, I made a comment yesterday in a meeting, and I'll stick to it. I brought in a consultant when I first started in this role to look at our communications, and they said short, frequent communication. So much of what we do in academia is long, wordy, infrequent communication. So I think we have to change the way we think, the way we listen, in a lot of respects. And the good thing is that there are a lot of bright young comms people out there who know how to do these things, who want to do those things, and are really good at it if we will just listen to them.
You've talked about getting the right message out there, and that we can't be the hero, we need to be the mentor. And so I really think what you're getting at is that we need to focus on the impact of what we do. Is that correct? And
Absolutely.
how do we do that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we have to want to. I had a former colleague who told me that he had a professor in grad school who a student raised their hand and said, Dr. So-and-so, but I don't think it's that way in the real world. And the professor turned around and sneered and said, well, I don't much care for the real world. And went back to drawing their model on the chalkboard. We sometimes get fairly cavalier about what we owe our funders. Now, in a lot of our institutions, we are in real dollars. We see declining state support we see declining federal support for ag research and extension. And we're not going to turn that around by doing irrelevant work. And so I think we've really got to work to be relevant, and we're not going to be relevant if we don't have a continual conversation. Now, in some respects, we've got to lead that conversation, but we've got to have that conversation.
I agree. We're gearing up for that conversation right now, right here in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get hit every day with so many different challenges? What are some of the things that keep you up at night? What are some of those top challenges you think we're facing right now?
I think that we are in a unique time right now in academia, and we have some real challenges with funding. We have some real challenges with the discrediting of science politically. And I spent enough time in Washington, D.C. to know the games that are sometimes played. And I think that's a part of what we have to be concerned about. But again, we control what we control, and that's what we communicate out. And in general, I watch football on Saturdays, and I see every NCAA school has their little TV spot, and they all look the same to me. And that's a challenge that we are all kind of following a cookie cutter approach of bragging on ourselves. I think so. Let me give you an example of something that we did. Our comms director here in the division last year, when we did our annual report that we take to the legislature, she mandated that we have quotes from our clientele in big, bold letters, italics, and a picture of them. Now, I think if she wasn't so good, we'd have had a picture of the deans and the directors instead. Now, which is more important to a member of the state legislature? Or, in fact, we had a member of the legislature as one of those quotes. They're here, or do they want to hear from the VP of Ag? And I think they would rather hear from a farm group leader. They would rather hear from somebody that's respected, one of their peers. But that it's not about us. At the end of the day, we've got to learn to communicate in a way that resonates with the audience instead of just telling what we want to tell.
I agree. All right, so we've got another question, and this is from Stephen. He says one thing that he's done in conversation is to really remind people as of the past compared to the present. So with some queries like, do you like antibiotics? Do you think lasers are useful? Do you like public sanitation and clean water? And so generally the pursuit of science, technology, and large-scale solutions have made things better. And it's because of science and education that make these things possible. So how can we use some of these tactics? Or is this a useful tactic? I think it is.
I do too. And we have people, our student body compared to my age, are so young now, and I forget the things that they have grown up with that they take for granted that to me is still amazing. Uh, you mentioned antibiotics. Uh, I think, if we don't learn our history lessons, we're doomed to repeat them. And I think we've got to learn how to effectively communicate. And I will come back to, I think we've got to communicate what is the scientific process.
Yeah.
I have some very good friends that they don't really understand. They're not scientists. They don't understand, for example, that the answer for a question may change over time.
Yeah.
To them, that, oh, you guys just don't know what you're doing, when in fact it's progress in my mind.
Right.
And I think we've got to convey those kind of things, and that means we've got to tell them what the scientific method is in a way that a layman can understand.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And when faced with misinformation or hostility online, what's the most constructive way for scientists or students to respond? And should we engage at all?
That's a great question. I will tell you, I think my counterpart over in the comms department would tell you that it depends. Um, there are times when you will just get in the fig fen with the fig and get muddy. There are other times that you can make a difference. I think all of us who are scientists have got to be prepared to communicate to a lay audience. They don't want to know how you built the model. They don't want to know all the details, but they want to understand the basis of science. And um, you, you know, um, I think when you watch the news today, the concept of, is that a causal relationship or a correlation?
Mm-hmm.
If we're not teaching the difference between those two, what are we doing? We've got to help our students in our classrooms learn about the difference between those two. And just because they're an undergrad does not mean they can't learn the difference. And I think we've saved some things for grad school that we should be teaching at the undergrad level.
Well, and I think some of that happens with our experiential learning opportunities, with looking at data sets, right, and being able to describe them.
Absolutely, we need to do lots of that.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we kind of short arm that and don't really. Oh, they're an undergrad; they can't understand the scientific method. So you just go over here and do this little calculation. And no, we need to teach them the scientific method as an undergrad.
So, we talk a lot about enrollment cliffs, and we talk a lot about truly engaging and recruiting students, and the value of higher education. And you said, there's a lack of trust, and do we truly need it? And we say all the time, that we prepare students for careers that we don't even know exist
Mm-hmm.
now. And we've said that for years. So I think that's one of the unique things about higher education, right? Is you're giving tools to put in your toolbox as opposed to learning a specific trade or skill set, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we truly communicate that? That's kind of exciting to me.
Well, it's exciting to me too, and it's certainly it's what led me to go to college, because it was just fun, and what led me to go to grad school. I was fascinated by all these things, and I've been fascinated by my subject matter my entire career. But I think we've got to effectively communicate with that next generation. And so I think part of it is, and this is another aspect of our communication in academia, we have multiple audiences. It's not just our extension clientele. It's not just the farm group leaders in the state. It's also the 14-year-old that's trying to decide if they go to college, what are they going to major in? And they are not going to be attracted to the same information as the 55-year-old Farm Bureau president. So part of our communication strategy must be, all right, we've got to identify our different audiences and we've got to communicate with them in different ways. And, you know, I see this so often in that, you know, we're hitting platforms that we didn't hit before. And I think in agriculture, we've probably are not at the cutting edge, and we need to be.
All right, so we've talked about some challenges, but I'd like to flip it a little bit and kind of end on maybe a more optimistic note.
Okay.
So what are the things that excite you about the space we're in right now in higher education?
I think first of all, there are a lot of things. Let's take artificial intelligence. That's exciting to young people. And in agriculture and forestry, we've got plenty of applications. I had somebody just the other day tell me that they thought ag was one of the best places to make those applications. And I think there are. Um, we've got opportunities to tell our story to young people, um, and get them engaged. I'll admit, I was not a first adopter for uh, undergraduate research experiences. I It took me a while to buy in, but when I did, it was one of the best things I ever did. And I think we have so many real world applications that we can talk to folks about that I think will engage young people. And so, and I think the solution to the communication is what I said earlier. And young people are going to be the ones that develop new ways of communicating for us, and are doing great stuff. And we just need to kind of turn them loose and let them go.
Great. I think we had another question comes in. What gives you hope that science and public trust can still align in the years ahead?
I think and part of the reason that I have said what I've said today is I began my career where I just assumed that public trust was a given. I didn't have to work at earning it. It just was there. And now we have to learn to earn it. And I think we have to uh, listen to the marketing experts, and we've got to learn to convey things uh, in a way that the general public can understand it. And when we do, it's powerful and it's enjoyable because, you know, what's a good day for me now is to go to a meeting with a bunch of bankers and I find that I taught half the people in the room at some point. and they remember that engagement. And so I think we have a lot of opportunities to do these kind of things if we will be relevant. But if we stick our head in the sand and we do irrelevant kind of things, we will pay the price.
All right, Dr. Coble, we're going to ask you one last question.
Okay.
When you think about the next generation of agricultural scientists, what gives you hope?
So I think the first thing is that it is much easier for me to sell this to an assistant professor than a full professor. What I've said today, most full professors hate to hear. And I said it at my professional meetings when I was president. I got berated by full professors, and I had some assistant professors who said thank you. So I think there is an inclination for young faculty to do these kind of things. They want to be relevant. I think we need to teach them how to be relevant. One of the things that Anderson and his co-authors talked about was how to talk about policy issues, not from the standpoint of being an advocate, but being a moderator of a dialogue so that we can keep from getting shot by the warring factions. And politics has just gotten so ugly that I think we need to revitalize how do we talk about controversial issues in a constructive fashion and an objective fashion, that we're scientists and we're leading a dialogue to let you decide. But I do worry about some young scientists feeling like, well, I've got to be an advocate, and that can be dangerous sometimes.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Coble. John, yep, we'll keep fighting on. We'll keep trudging forward. I'd like to thank CAST, and I'd like to thank everybody that joined us virtual for this really dynamic talk, challenging talk, but hopefully we left on a positive note. So thank you very much.
Thank you.